All right, well, hello everyone. It's me and Profesor, and it's been a while since I've done a video for you, um, but I definitely wanted to get this video for you before we went to spring vacation, and I'll sure have at least a couple more videos in the second half of the semester, especially as we get toward the latter stages, and I'll have a video or a couple of videos about the big three forums, just give you more insight in terms of what you have to do with those. But for this video, I wanted to go ahead and say a few things about part six of the final exam. By now, all of you should have a pretty good idea on what questions you want to work on for the final exam. This thing isn't going to be due until the end of May, so I think it was May 30th that I want all your answers. Just write your answers into Blackboard, and I'll open up the Blackboard portion for all of you, probably about the second week of May. So definitely in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the semester, and of course going into the semester finals week, I'll have the Blackboard portion for you, and you just go ahead and type in your answers there. Um, Parts 1 through 5, of course, are fairly self-explanatory. You just have to go ahead and choose questions from choose a series of questions pertaining to the Who Built America readings. But the last part is something different, something unique, and it's something that's actually been a little bit more emphasized for not just here at Grossmont, but for other schools as well. Because I know for Mesa College, I have to have a SLO component in some of my assignments, and not so much at Southwest. And that's been talked about over the past couple of years, but it's nothing that I've really had to fully incorporate into my classes. But definitely for here at Grossmont at Mesa, this is something that I've had more of. For this class a few years ago, I had the SLO as a separate assignment, but now I just included it as part of the final exam. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the PDF copy of the final exam, and I'll show you what you need to do for part 6. So I already have the PDF copy right here on a separate tab, so let me go ahead and click that, and we'll take a look at it together. All right. Again, as I told you in the announcements, when I opened up the PDF copy, disregard the information here for the fall semester. I'm basically using the same exam, the same series of questions that I used for the fall semester. So it's the same exam. So again, don't worry, don't pay attention to the fact that it says fall semester and it's a different section number. All right, let's quickly scan through parts 1 through 5. So this is fairly self-explanatory. So again, depending on how many questions there are in each part, choose either one question. So if there are 3 questions, choose one from the 3. And when there are 4 questions, then you choose a 2 from the 4. And then you write your answers directly into Blackboard itself. Again, please don't send in any files. Reserve that for the writing assignments, whether it's the book review, the EBSCO assignment, and of course the Ken Burns the Jazz comparative essay. But for this, type in your answers into Blackboard itself. Now here we're getting into part 6, and part 6 is 10 points, and again, it's going to be called, this is the SLO assessment, and there's basically 4 things that you need to do. Now, if you read the directions and you're confused as to what I'm saying here, that's why I'm making this video to clear up this part. So if this stuff looks like a babble or mumbo jumbo to you, I'll try to clear it up so it's not that much mumbo jumbo, so to speak. All right, what you need to do is when you get to this part, the first thing you need to do is you're going to read a series of primary sources. By primary sources, these refers to items, documents, speeches, photographs that pertain to what happened on that scene. So, for example, when Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech back in 1963, that's a primary source. The speech itself, the video of the speech, any newspaper accounts of the speech from 1963, those are primary sources. Likewise, too, the famous photograph of Kent State, where the student is dead, and there's a female student kneeling over his body, just screaming in anguish, basically asking why did this happen. That classic photo from 1970 or 71. Or 1970, I forget exactly when that incident took place. But that classic photo is an example of a primary source. So primary sources, again, are things which happened at the time, whether it was 1970, 1960, 1955, FDR's speech of 1941. You get the idea. Secondary sources refer to things written after the fact. So, for example, the Who Built America text, that's a secondary source. It's a collection of different writings, different elements synthesized into one compilation document. That is, it's compiling different items. So again, textbooks or monographs. So for example, the books that you're going to be choosing for the book review, those are secondary sources. Those are things that are synthesized, looked at, analyzed, and repackaged, rewritten by writers, commentators, scholars, professors. You get the idea. But the objective here is to the objective here is to look at the primary sources and then you synthesize them, you interpret them. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the set of 5 primary sources I have included here in this worksheet. And I'll show you those 5 sources in just a bit. The second thing you're going to do is, after you look at all of the sources, again, number 1, look at everything. Number 2, analyze and synthesize and comment as to what the sources mean. How do they prove a statement, a thesis statement? That's a second step. The third step is you're to articulate or to write a cause or consequence of the event that's represented by the sources. So the event that's going to be covered in these primary sources, those are the famous sit-down strikes, which took place in Michigan, in especially Flint, but to Detroit also, that happened with the auto factories, whether it's General Motors, Chrysler, or the companies which contributed, that is, which were also part of the auto industry. That is, whether it's tires, auto bodies, chassis, things of that nature. So again, the events that took place in the fall of 1936 and 1936, with respect to the sit-down strikes, those are that's the main event, and that's the event, that's the source, or not the source, but the focus of the primary sources. So number 3 is is that after you look at the sources, you're to develop or write what you think is either a cause or a consequence, that is something that led to or something that was an after effect of this big event. And again, the big event being the sit-down strikes. And number 4, the fourth thing you need to do is to describe one important person involved in this event. There are some people who are listed in the primary sources, but of course there's others that are listed in the Who Built America text, chief among them people like President Roosevelt, who was around at the time, and also the legendary labor leader Walter Reuther. We're going to have a PowerPoint about Walter in just a few weeks' time. So again, the first thing you need to do is look at all the sources. Think about what's happening, what the sources are saying. The second thing you do is analyze or synthesize and comment as to what the sources mean. That is, how they back up what's called the thesis statement. Third one is develop either a cause or consequence of this event represented by the sources. And fourth is to describe one important person involved in this event and explain his or her significance. Okay, so let's go take a look at what the sources are, and then we'll begin to wrap things up. So let me just go ahead and scroll through here, and actually let me go ahead and quickly elaborate on what you need to do. That is, in terms of what you have to actually write into Blackboard. So after you look at all the sources, then what you do in Blackboard is you write down in Blackboard. In the space for this part of the final for part 6, you write down either number either 1, 2, or 3, or 2, 3, and 4. It doesn't matter, just as long as your answers are numbered, so I can see them more clearly, more readily. So in your first answer, what you need to do is after you look at all the sources, explain in 4 to 5 sentences or a paragraph as to how the sources, that is the documents I'm going to show you, how those documents support this above thesis statement. And by the thesis statement, that is, I'm making a statement, I'm making an assertion or a hypothesis. And the statement reads as follows. The sit-down strikes of 1936 and 1937 contributed to not only the political growth of organized labor, but also to the development of a collective working class culture. That's my statement. I'm making the statement, and your job is to try to prove this statement. And to do that, you write in 4 to 5 sentences, or maybe more if you want to go 6 or 7, 8 sentences. That's absolutely fine. So, and basically, in one short paragraph, that is, explain in a short paragraph how these sources, these documents I'm going to show you, how do those sources prove that the statement here in red is true. I'm making the assertion that the statement in red is true, and your job is to back up that the statement is true by explaining how the statement is true. And again, you do that after you read these you look at these 5 documents. The third thing that you need to do, and this is the second thing that you're going to write into Blackboard, is articulate a cause or consequence of the sit-down strikes of 1936 and 1937. So what you can do here is not only rely on the sources I'm going to show you, but anything from Who Built America. And of course, since that book is labor intensive, a lot of coverage, of course, of organized labor, you can rely on Who Built America to back you up and give you more information, to give you better context as to what's happening in the sit-down strikes of 1936, 1937. So in other words, write in a short paragraph here. So again, 4 to 5 sentences, and basically explain what you think is a cause of the sit-down strikes. What is an event that happened which led the people to go on strike in the first place, or what is an event that happened that was a result of these sit-down strikes? So when I say the term assessment topic, all that I'm basically referring to is the sit-down strike. So in other words, assessment topic is more or less the legal mumbo-jumbo that those of us in history department have to use. I guess you might say the legal disclaimer, or that type, the legal jargon as it were. But again, don't get confused by assessment topic. That simply means the sit-down strikes of 1936, 1937. And then the fourth thing you're going to do, which is actually the third thing you're going to write into Blackboard, is describe one important person involved in sit-down strikes of these years and explain his or her significance in this event. Excuse me. And again, you can pick on people who were described in these sources, or anybody who's mentioned in Who Built America. All right, so let's take a quick look at what these sources are, and then we'll wrap things up here. Don't worry about this. I'll come back to this in just a moment here. Obviously, you probably figured out that Profesor is a Family Guy fan, but I'll explain more about that in just a bit. Okay, now here are the primary source documents that you need to use to answer the questions for part 6 of the final. All right, source number 1 is an article, or an abstract of an article written by Louis Adamic for The Nation magazine back in the 1930s. So in this abstract, Mr. Adamic is talking about a lot of the various points, the various elements of what the sit-down strike is entailing. So again, this is stuff that was written back in 1936, and he's talking about many of the key events that's happening. What are people saying? What are their actions? Blah blah blah, that type of thing. So in other words, Mr. Adamic is basically reporting on the events as they're happening on the ground in 1936 and 1937. So read all of these items here, and all of these things make up your first source. Now the second source is also quite intriguing. This is from Janora Dolinger, who was organizer of the Women's Auxiliary of the United Auto Workers. The UAW was coming into its own. It was just getting started back in the 1930s. And in this 1995 interview that was conducted with her, she talks about the events that happened about 60 years previously. So she's talking about the conditions in the Flint, in the Flint factories, the people who were there, what types of background there were, and the conditions in terms of their homes, and how the women and the men were segregated. So basically, she outlines a lot of the bad things that were happening, not just on the assembly lines, not just on the lines, but what's happening with the families, and how awful morale was for the workers back in that point in time. She's talking about the wages and the bad conditions, the monotony. again, horrible conditions, and she talks about the classic Charlie Chaplin film Modern Times. If any of you have seen Modern Times, you know exactly what's going on here. But if you haven't, I recommend you check it out. Just go do a YouTube search for Charlie Chaplin Modern Times. It's a classic. It's about a 15-minute short film, but Chaplin does a great job of outlining the problems that many workers faced back in those days. And in fact, in Modern Times, there's a scene where Chaplin, who's a worker, is he's got the shakes, he's trembling because of the repetitive motion. There was a term for that back in those days. It's called Forditis. Forditis basically meant that because you were on the assembly line, you had such repetitive motions, constant repetition, doing the same thing over and over again. Um, Even though you left the plant, you still had those motions. You were still twitching, and your hands kept shaking. So Chaplin outlines a lot of that in Modern Times. So again, I do recommend that you would check out Modern Times too after you finish looking at all of these items here. Dollinger also talks about this idea that once you pass the gates of GM, forget about the U.S. Constitution. Workers had no rights when they entered that plant. So the issues with respect to what the bosses felt, what the foremen felt, and of course the stool pigeons and the thugs, the people who the guys who kept everybody in line and reported in case anybody was talking about organizing and walking off the job, things of that nature. So she does a great job of talking about all of these conditions and the morale and how when people finally said enough was enough. So again, this is source number 2. That is, this was her testimony talking about what happened back in 1935. And the next 3 sources are actually photographs. So as I mentioned, photographs are also considered primary documents. So in this case, we see how some of the workers view the union thugs, that is, or the company thugs, the ones who are keeping an eye on the workers. These were often called stool pigeons. So in source 3, we see some workers hanging effigies of the stool pigeons at the Fisher body plant number 2. And then at Fisher Plant number 1, we see an actual sit-down strike going on. But notice how the men are peaceful. They're just reading magazines, drinking coffee. They're not causing a commotion or a ruckus. So that was a really key strategy. That is, they didn't want to get into what's called wildcat strikes and just cause mischief and mayhem and yell at people. Just to get into the plant and then sit down on the job. That was the focus. And this stuff, of course, drove the companies nuts, but at the same time, the workers weren't causing much in terms of a mischief or mayhem to necessitate calling the police to come into the plant. So that was definitely one key element of the workers' strategy. And the 5th and final source is is a scene of the women coming out. So here, look at the scene from March of 1937. You see how the women are dressed, and everything looks organized. In fact, if anything, it looks like the women might be going to maybe a church function or maybe a book club type of thing. So clearly, any ideas that strikes were somehow seen as a domain of goons and thugs and nasty people, loud people, oh, those dirty foreigners, those agitators, that type of thing. So clearly, this image of the women outside the Chrysler plant in 1937 essentially belies that myth that strikes and unions are the domains of communists, rabble rousers, agitators, subversives, that type of thing. So clearly, this photo portrays a really good image of the workers and of the women, which was definitely their strategy back in those days. So there you have it, everybody. Those are your 5 sources: the 2 written items and the 3 photographs. So after you look at all of those 5 items, then you answer the questions I had listed at the beginning of the worksheet. And what you do when you answer your questions, and that's why I had the Family Guy stuff, so I'll finish off with that. Okay, all right, here we go. Almost there. Okay, so what you do, everybody, is into Blackboard, type in your answers in this format here. So definitely number your answers. Number them either 2, 3, 4, which corresponds to the sources themselves, or 1, 2, and 3. So either way, it doesn't matter. But just as long as everything is numbered in the proper sequential order. So in your first answer, that of course pertains to how you think the sources prove the thesis statement. So of course, I'll just have a space here, blah. These sources prove the thesis statement because blah, 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 this and blah, 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 that. You get the idea. And then in your second answer, again, either number 2 or 3, this is where you talk about articulate a cause or consequence of the sit-down strikes. So one major cause of the sit-down strikes was yada, 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 and so forth. And then for number 4 or number 3, depending on how you want to number it, this pertains, of course, to who was an important leader. So you could start, one important person at the time was President Roosevelt. He gave political space because of the New Deal, giggity, 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 yada, 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 yada. You get the idea. Yeah, I'm definitely a Family Guy fan, but I don't really watch it that much anymore. I was a big fan of it in the 2000s after Fox put the show back on the air, but I haven't really seen it too much in the last couple of years. I see it sparingly, but to me, the episodes from 2000. From 2005 onwards to about 2010, 2011, those are, I think, the classic episodes. So definitely, I'm quoting Quagmire here in this. But again, I'm just mentioning this as a space as a placeholder after you type in your numbers. All right, so there you have it, everybody. So again, that's what you need to do. So look at all the documents, interpret them, analyze them, answer and then answer all of these questions here. Again, there's three questions here. So answer these 3 questions, type in your answers in this format into Blackboard, and you're good to go. And the totality of all your 3 answers into Blackboard for part 6 will make up 10 points. Okay, so there you have it, everybody. So I hope this video helps. I know this video probably ran a little bit long, but like with all my videos, whether it's for this class, for the History 124 class, I definitely try to give as much detail as possible so that there's no confusion, there's no problems, everybody knows what they have to do, and everyone is on the same page. All right, that's it from here. So next time I have a video for you, it'll be, of course, after spring vacation, and some of those videos, most likely they'll focus mainly on the big 3 forum topics. All right, so that's it, everybody. Take care. Hope you guys are doing fine as we get to the middle of the semester, and I'll talk to you guys again very soon.